Jasmine and Isaiah Washington sit frozen as flight attendant Meredith announces over the intercom that Aeroglobe 237 is grounded due to passenger noncompliance. Their father Malcolm, phone in hand, speaks firmly, "I didn't build this airline from nothing just to watch my children be humiliated for existing." Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves respect regardless of their skin color. Now, let's see how an ordinary flight turned into a powerful lesson about standing up against discrimination. The morning had started like any other for 14-year-old twins Jasmine and Isaiah Washington. Sunlight streamed through their bedroom windows as they packed their carry-ons for their first solo flight to visit their grandparents in Atlanta. Their excitement was palpable, buzzing through their spacious home in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood. "You sure you've got everything?" Malcolm Washington asked, leaning against Jasmine's doorframe. At 42, Malcolm carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had overcome countless obstacles to become one of the most successful black entrepreneurs in the country. His tech company had revolutionized supply chain management before he expanded his empire by acquiring struggling Aeroglobe Airlines 6 months ago. "Dad, we're 14, not 4, Jasmine replied with an eye roll, though she secretly appreciated his concern. She zipped her bag with finality, the braces on her teeth flashing as she smiled. Isaiah appeared in the hallway, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "We've been on planes with you since we were babies. We know the drill." Malcolm nodded, unconvinced. "This is different. You'll be by yourselves. Which is why you got us first-class tickets and made the flight attendants promise to check on us," Isaiah reminded him. "Plus, Grandma and Grandpa will be waiting at the gate in Atlanta." Malcolm sighed, checking his watch. "You're right. I just worry." He didn't share his deeper concerns, that the world wouldn't see his children as the bright, accomplished teenagers they were, but would judge them first by their skin color, as it had judged him throughout his climb to success. The drive to O'Hare International Airport was filled with Malcolm's last-minute reminders and the twins' excited chatter about their plans in Atlanta. As Malcolm's sleek black Tesla pulled up to the departures terminal, he gave them one final piece of advice. "If anything happens, anything at all that makes you uncomfortable, you call me. Immediately." "We will, Dad," they chorused, exchanging knowing glances. The bustling terminal was a maze of rolling suitcases and harried travelers. Malcolm helped the twins navigate to the premium check-in counter, where a ticket agent named Carol greeted them warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Washington," she said, recognizing him immediately. As Carol processed their boarding passes, a TSA agent passing by paused, eyeing the first-class tickets in the teenagers' hands. "Are you sure these are your tickets?" he asked, his tone suggesting they couldn't possibly belong in the premium line. Malcolm stepped forward, his expression neutral but his eyes hard. "Is there a problem, officer?" The agent stammered an apology and moved on. The twins exchanged glances. This wasn't their first encounter with such assumptions, but it never got easier. While they waited at security, Malcolm spotted Richard Keller, Aeroglobe's COO, approaching through the crowd. "Malcolm, good to see you," Richard said, extending his hand. "I got your email about the culture change initiatives. Bold moves. Necessary ones," Malcolm replied firmly. "An airline should serve all passengers equally, not just those who look a certain way." His recent acquisition of Aeroglobe had been motivated partly by the airline's poor reputation for customer service, particularly toward passengers of color. Richard nodded. "The board is behind you. It'll take time to change old habits, though. Time I'm willing to invest," Malcolm said, glancing at his children. "Speaking of which, these are my kids, Jasmine and Isaiah. They're flying to Atlanta today." After brief introductions, Richard assured Malcolm, "I've personally notified the crew that they're VIP passengers. They'll be well taken care of." What none of them noticed was flight attendant Meredith Bailey standing nearby, listening to their conversation with thinly veiled disdain. A 20-year veteran of Aeroglobe, Meredith had resented the changes Malcolm had been implementing since his takeover. As she watched the Washington family, she made a split-second decision to ignore the VIP notification that would soon appear on her passenger manifest. Security went smoothly, though Isaiah's bag was randomly selected for additional screening while dozens of other passengers passed through without such scrutiny. At the gate, Malcolm hugged his children tightly. "Remember what I said. Anything happens, you call." As the twins walked down the jetway, they were unaware that what should have been an exciting rite of passage would soon turn into something much more troubling. Stepping onto the plane, Jasmine and Isaiah felt a surge of excitement. This was their first solo flight, and the plush first-class cabin of Aeroglobe Flight 237 made it all the more special. The leather seats were wide and welcoming, the cabin quiet compared to the bustle of economy class they could glimpse further back. "1A and 1B, Isaiah murmured, checking their boarding passes. "That's us, right at the front." They made their way to their seats, stowing their backpacks in the overhead compartments. Jasmine slid into the window seat while Isaiah took the aisle, both of them trying to look nonchalant, as though traveling alone in first class was something they did every day. Flight attendant Meredith Bailey stood at the galley, watching them through narrowed eyes. She was in her late 50s, with platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun and lips pressed into a thin line. When she approached the twins, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clipped. "Are you certain you're in the correct seats?" Isaiah straightened his shoulders. "Yes, ma'am. 1A and 1B. Meredith glanced at their boarding passes with obvious skepticism. "These are first-class seats." "We know," Jasmine replied quietly, feeling her cheeks grow warm under the flight attendant's scrutiny. From across the aisle, a white businessman in his 40s lowered his newspaper. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Meredith's demeanor changed instantly. "Not at all, Mr. Bennett. Just making sure everyone's in their assigned seats." As she walked away, the man introduced himself. "Lawrence Bennett," he said, extending a hand to Isaiah. "Don't mind her. Some people can't help showing their biases." The twins thanked him, grateful for the intervention but embarrassed it had been necessary at all. As other first-class passengers boarded, Meredith was all smiles and assistance, helping them stow luggage and offering pre-flight beverages. When the drink service reached their row, Jasmine politely requested orange juice. "We'll see if there's time," Meredith responded curtly before moving on to serve the white passengers across the aisle immediately. Isaiah and Jasmine exchanged glances. They had been raised to recognize differential treatment but also to maintain their dignity in the face of it. They remained quiet as the cabin filled and the flight attendants prepared for departure. 20 minutes into the flight, with the seatbelt sign off, Isaiah accidentally knocked over his water cup while reaching for his backpack. The spill was minor, contained to his tray table, but Meredith's reaction was disproportionate. "This is exactly why children shouldn't be in first class," she muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear as she aggressively wiped up the water. "It's not a playground." Isaiah's face burned with humiliation. "I'm sorry, it was an accident." Across the aisle, an elderly black woman named Gloria Harrison observed the interaction with interest, discreetly jotting notes in a small leather-bound notebook. Her keen eyes missed nothing. At the galley, Meredith whispered to her colleague, Kyle Lopez, a younger flight attendant with kind eyes. "Those kids in 1A and 1B? Definitely upgrade frauds. Probably used their parents' miles without permission." Kyle frowned. "They seem well behaved to me. And they're on the VIP list." "Please," Meredith scoffed. "VIP list gets longer every day. Means nothing anymore." As the flight continued, other passengers began to notice the disparate treatment. A white businessman received immediate attention when he pressed his call button, while Jasmine's remained unanswered for 15 minutes. Under the tray table, the twins texted each other, their phones on airplane mode but Wi-Fi connected. "Jasmine, is it just me or is she being super rude?" Isaiah, not just you. Should we say something? Jasmine, Dad always says pick your battles. Maybe this isn't worth it. Isaiah, but if we don't say something, nothing changes. Outside the windows, the sky darkened as the plane flew through patches of turbulence, the occasional bump and shudder mirroring the growing tension within the first-class cabin. An hour into the flight, the meal service began. The aroma of freshly warmed bread and grilled chicken filled the first-class cabin as Meredith and Kyle distributed meals with white tablecloths and real silverware. When they reached the twins, Meredith slid their trays in front of them with barely a glance. Chicken or pasta? She asked flatly. Chicken, please, Jasmine replied. Pasta for me, Isaiah added. Meredith nodded curtly and moved on, spending considerably more time chatting with the other first-class passengers, explaining the wine pairings and offering fresh pepper for their salads, services she hadn't mentioned to the twins. Across the aisle, a white businessman in his 30s had clearly had too much to drink. His voice grew louder with each scotch, and he repeatedly pressed his call button for refills. Meredith responded promptly each time, her customer service smile firmly in place despite his increasingly inappropriate comments. Meanwhile, she scrutinized the twins' every move, hovering nearby as they ate, quick to point out when Isaiah's elbow briefly extended into the aisle. We need to keep the aisles clear, she scolded, though she'd said nothing about the briefcase protruding from under the seat of another passenger. After the meal service, Jasmine felt cold in the air-conditioned cabin. She noticed other passengers had been given blankets and decided to request one. When Meredith passed by, Jasmine raised her hand slightly. Excuse me, could I have a blanket, please? Meredith barely paused. We're out. Moments later, she offered the last blanket to an older white woman across the aisle. Isaiah had been watching this pattern of behavior silently, but seeing his sister's shoulders slump in resignation pushed him to act. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stood up as Meredith returned down the aisle. Excuse me, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I couldn't help but notice that you told my sister we were out of blankets, but you just gave one to another passenger. Meredith's eyes narrowed. Sir, you need to take your seat. I will, Isaiah replied, conscious of keeping his tone respectful but firm, just as his father had taught him. But I'd like to understand why you've been treating us differently than the other passengers. The cabin grew quiet as nearby passengers tuned in to the confrontation. Meredith's face flushed. I'm treating all passengers according to company policy, she said, her voice tight. And that policy states that unaccompanied minors need to remain seated and not cause disturbances. We haven't caused any disturbances, Jasmine said, joining the conversation. We've been polite and followed all the rules. From his position at the galley, Kyle Lopez watched the exchange with growing discomfort. He'd noticed Meredith's behavior throughout the flight but had hesitated to intervene. Now, seeing the twins standing their ground with remarkable composure, he felt ashamed of his silence. Meredith's voice rose slightly. If you continue to argue with crew members, I'll be forced to report this as a security incident. Several passengers had begun recording the interaction on their phones. Lawrence Bennett from across the aisle spoke up again. They're not arguing, they're asking reasonable questions. I've been watching how you've treated these kids all flight. This doesn't concern you, sir, Meredith snapped, before turning back to the twins. This is your final warning. Return to your seats immediately, or I'll have security meet the plane. Isaiah sat down, but his eyes remained locked with Meredith's. We are in our seats. But we deserve the same respect as every other passenger. That's it, Meredith hissed. She stormed to the intercom phone. I'm calling security. As she marched away, Isaiah pulled out his phone and began typing rapidly. What are you doing? Jasmine whispered urgently. Texting Dad, Isaiah replied. He told us to contact him if anything happened, and this definitely counts. As Isaiah texted, memories of his father's stories flashed through his mind. Malcolm had often spoken of his own experiences with discrimination, being followed in stores, pulled over by police without cause, or questioned about his presence in upscale neighborhoods. He had taught his children to stand up for themselves while staying safe, a delicate balance that Isaiah was trying his best to maintain now. Meredith's voice came over the intercom. "This is the lead flight attendant. We have a situation requiring security assistance in first class. Prepare for possible removal of disruptive passengers." Jasmine felt tears threatening but blinked them back. They had done nothing wrong, yet somehow they were now being characterized as threats. The injustice of it burned in her chest. "It'll be okay," Isaiah assured her, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Dad will know what to do." The tension in the first-class cabin was palpable as two uniformed security officers boarded the plane during the unscheduled stop in Cleveland. Passengers murmured among themselves, many still recording the unfolding drama on their phones. Jasmine's heart pounded so hard she was certain everyone could hear it, while Isaiah maintained a composed exterior despite his growing anger. The security officers, a white man named Officer Dawson and a Hispanic woman named Officer Rivera, approached row 1 with Meredith leading the way, her face set in righteous indignation. "These are the disruptive passengers," Meredith announced loudly, pointing at the twins. "They've been argumentative and threatening throughout the flight." Officer Rivera looked at the two teenagers with evident surprise. "These two?" Jasmine couldn't hold back her tears any longer. "We haven't done anything wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "She's been treating us differently from everyone else since we boarded." Isaiah pulled out his phone. "I've documented everything. She ignored our requests while immediately helping others. She claimed they were out of blankets but gave one to someone else right after. She criticized me for a small water spill but ignored disruptive behavior from other passengers." Officer Dawson frowned. "You're not supposed to use phones during flight. It's on airplane mode," Isaiah clarified. "We're allowed to use Wi-Fi, and I was texting my sister so we wouldn't disturb anyone by talking." From across the aisle, Lawrence Bennett unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. "Officers, I've witnessed everything these kids are saying. They've been polite and composed despite being subjected to clearly discriminatory treatment." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the cabin as other passengers nodded. Kyle Lopez, who had been hovering uncertainly behind Meredith, stepped forward. "I need to speak up," he said, his professional demeanor at odds with his obvious discomfort. "These passengers haven't violated any policies. They've been respectful and compliant throughout the flight." Meredith whirled on him. "Kyle! This is not your decision to make." "I can't stand by and watch this," Kyle responded firmly. "What's happening here isn't right." Meredith turned back to the security officers. "They were argumentative and made me feel threatened. As the lead flight attendant, my assessment of passenger behavior is what matters here." "We weren't threatening," Jasmine protested. "We just asked why we were being treated differently." Officer Rivera looked increasingly skeptical of Meredith's claims. "Ma'am, can you describe specifically how these minors threatened you?" Meredith's nostrils flared. Their tone was aggressive. "They questioned my authority repeatedly and created a hostile environment." From the back of the first-class cabin, Gloria Harrison rose from her seat. The elderly woman moved slowly but purposefully toward the officers, her leather notebook in hand. "Perhaps my observations might be useful," she said in a clear, steady voice that belied her 80 years. "I'm a retired judge, and I've been taking notes on this situation since we boarded." She opened her notebook. The flight attendant ignored these children's requests 17 times while immediately attending to white passengers. She made 6 derogatory comments about their presence in first class. She provided inferior service consistently and escalated a minor water spill into a major incident. The officers exchanged glances as Gloria continued listing specific incidents with times and direct quotes. The captain's voice suddenly came over the intercom. "This is Captain Phillips. Due to the current situation, we'll be experiencing a delay. All passengers, please remain seated. Crew members, Please return to your stations while we sort this out. The twins looked at each other with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Isaiah checked his phone and saw that his father had responded, on it. Don't move. Don't sign anything. Help is coming. What do you think about this situation? Comment number 1 if you think Meredith should be fired immediately for her discriminatory behavior. Comment number 2 if you believe the airline should implement mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. Like this video if you've ever witnessed or experienced similar treatment, and subscribe to hear how Malcolm Washington responds to this situation. Will the twins be forced off the plane, or will justice prevail? What would you do if you were in Isaiah and Jasmine's position? Let's continue this shocking story. 15 minutes earlier, Malcolm Washington had been leading a quarterly strategy meeting with his executive team at Aeroglobe headquarters in Chicago. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, he stood before a wall of screens displaying the airline's improving performance metrics since his acquisition. The customer satisfaction scores are trending upward, but we're still seeing disparities in how different demographic groups rate their experiences, Malcolm explained, gesturing to a graph. This suggests our culture change initiatives are working but haven't fully penetrated all levels of. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Normally, Malcolm never interrupted meetings for calls or texts, but with his children traveling alone, he had set a special notification for their messages. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted from mild concern to alarm as he read Isaiah's text. Dad, flight attendant discriminating against us. Threatened to have security remove us from plane. We didn't do anything wrong. She's calling security now. What should we do? Excuse me, Malcolm said to the room of executives. I need to address an urgent situation. Richard, please continue the presentation. He stepped into his private office and immediately called the airline's operations center. This is Malcolm Washington, he stated calmly but firmly. I need information about Aeroglobe Flight 237 to Atlanta, currently in progress. There's a situation developing that requires my immediate attention. The operations manager, initially flustered by the CEO's direct call, quickly provided details. Flight 237 is currently diverting to Cleveland for an unscheduled stop due to a reported passenger disturbance. What exactly is the nature of this disturbance? Malcolm pressed. The lead flight attendant, Meredith Bailey, has reported unruly behavior from 2 young passengers in first class. Security has been requested to meet the aircraft. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Those unruly passengers are my children. A stunned silence followed. Connect me to the cockpit immediately, Malcolm ordered. While waiting for the connection, Malcolm's assistant, Danielle, appeared at his door. Sir, you're getting mentions on social media. There are live streams from Flight 237 showing your children being confronted by a flight attendant. Malcolm nodded grimly. Pull them up. Danielle projected several social media feeds onto his office wall. The videos clearly showed his children remaining composed while Meredith grew increasingly agitated. Other passengers could be heard defending the twins. As Malcolm watched the footage, memories of his own experiences with discrimination flooded back. Growing up in Southside Chicago, he'd faced prejudice at every turn. When he'd started his tech company after college, investors had questioned his credentials despite his Harvard MBA. Even after becoming successful, he'd been mistaken for staff at his own corporate events. He had acquired Aeroglobe not just as a business opportunity but as a chance to transform a company with a poor record on diversity and inclusion. Now his own children were experiencing the very discrimination he had been working to eliminate. The phone on his desk buzzed. I have Captain Phillips from Flight 237, his assistant announced. Malcolm picked up. Captain, this is Malcolm Washington, CEO of Aeroglobe. Mr. Washington, the pilot responded, clearly surprised. What can I do for you, sir? I understand there's a situation involving 2 young passengers in first class. Yes, sir. The lead flight attendant has reported a disturbance. We've diverted to Cleveland, and airport security is currently on board. Those passengers are my children, Captain, Malcolm stated, his voice level but authoritative. I've reviewed video evidence showing they've done nothing wrong. This appears to be a clear case of discriminatory treatment by your lead flight attendant. There was a pause before the captain replied. Sir, I wasn't aware of the circumstances. Put me on speakerphone in the cockpit, Malcolm instructed. When the captain confirmed he had done so, Malcolm continued, his voice resonating with authority. I am issuing direct orders as CEO of this airline. No passengers are to be removed from that flight without my explicit authorization. All security personnel are to stand down immediately. The aircraft is to remain at the gate until I arrive. You're coming here? The captain asked, stunned. My private jet is being prepared as we speak. I'll be in Cleveland within the hour, Malcolm confirmed. In the meantime, you will announce to the passengers that the situation is being addressed at the highest levels of the company. The lead flight attendant is to return to the crew rest area and remain there until my arrival. Understood, sir, the captain replied. One more thing, Malcolm added. Please inform all passengers that they will receive full compensation for their inconvenience today, along with my personal apology. As Malcolm ended the call, he turned to Danielle. Contact the board members. I'm calling an emergency meeting via video conference during my flight to Cleveland. And get me everything we have on Meredith Bailey's employment record. Within minutes, Malcolm was in his Tesla, racing toward the private aviation terminal where his jet was waiting. As he drove, he joined the emergency board meeting via his car's communication system. Gentlemen, ladies, he began, his voice steady despite his anger. Today we are facing exactly the kind of situation our culture change initiatives were designed to prevent. I will not stand by while my own children, or any passengers, are discriminated against on one of our aircraft. Richard Keller, who had joined from the office, spoke up. We're reviewing Ms. Bailey's personnel file now. There are 3 previous complaints about potential discriminatory behavior, all filed by passengers of color. None resulted in disciplinary action under the previous management. Malcolm's grip tightened on the steering wheel. That changes today. This incident will serve as a turning point for our entire organization. As his jet took off minutes later, Malcolm reviewed the social media videos again, his determination hardening. By the time he landed in Cleveland, he had formulated a plan that would not only address this immediate situation but would accelerate the cultural transformation of the entire airline. The atmosphere aboard Aeroglobe Flight 237 had transformed into a strange limbo. Security officers remained near the front of the aircraft but had not removed the Washington twins. Meredith Bailey had retreated to the galley, her face flushed with indignation as she whispered furiously with another flight attendant. Passengers scrolled through their phones, sharing videos of the incident on social media, while others stretched their legs in the aisle during the unexpected delay. Jasmine and Isaiah sat quietly in their seats, exhausted by the emotional toll of the confrontation but relieved that they hadn't been forced to leave the plane. Lawrence Bennett had moved to sit in the empty seat beside Isaiah, offering reassurance and his business card. Your composure was remarkable, he told them. Many adults wouldn't have handled that situation with such dignity. The PA system crackled to life, and Captain Phillips's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I want to update you on our current situation. We've been instructed to remain at the gate temporarily. I've just been informed that Malcolm Washington, the CEO of Aeroglobe Airlines, is personally en route to address the situation that occurred today. He extends his sincere apologies for the delay and has authorized full compensation for all passengers. We appreciate your continued patience. A wave of murmurs swept through the cabin as passengers processed this unexpected development. Meredith's face drained of color as she emerged from the galley, grabbing Kyle's arm. The CEO is coming here. Now, she hissed. Why would he involve himself in a routine passenger issue? Kyle glanced meaningfully toward the twins. Maybe it's not as routine as you think. The minutes ticked by slowly. Some passengers napped, others chatted with their neighbors about the unusual turn of events. Gloria Harrison had moved to sit near the twins, occasionally patting Jasmine's hand reassuringly. Nearly an hour after the announcement, a commotion at the front of the aircraft drew everyone's attention. Malcolm Washington boarded the plane, followed by Richard Keller and 2 other executives. In his tailored suit and with his commanding presence, Malcolm filled the narrow aircraft aisle. Meredith stepped forward, customer service smile firmly in place. "Mr. Washington, welcome aboard. I'm Meredith Bailey, lead flight attendant. We had a situation with some unruly passengers, but it's under control now." Malcolm didn't acknowledge her. Instead, he moved directly to row 1, where his children sat. "Jasmine. Isaiah. Are you all right?" They nodded, relief evident in their faces. "Dad," Isaiah said quietly, "we tried to handle it like you taught us." "You did everything right," Malcolm assured them before turning to face the cabin. The passengers watched in stunned silence as Malcolm addressed the plane. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Malcolm Washington, CEO of Aeroglobe Airlines. I want to apologize personally for the delay and disruption to your journey today." His voice was measured but carried throughout the cabin. "More importantly, I need to address the incident that occurred here." He gestured toward Jasmine and Isaiah. "These disruptive passengers are my children. They were flying to visit their grandparents and instead were subjected to discriminatory treatment that violated every standard of service our airline claims to uphold." Meredith's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and horror as the realization dawned on her. "Your children? But I didn't. I never." Malcolm turned to her, his expression stern but controlled. "Ms. Bailey, the evidence of your behavior is extensive and clear. Multiple passengers have recorded your interactions, and their testimony corroborates what my children reported." Richard Keller stepped forward with a tablet. "We've reviewed footage submitted by passengers, Ms. Bailey. We've also pulled your service record, including previous complaints that were inadequately addressed by our former management." Meredith's professional demeanor crumbled. "They were being disruptive. I was just following protocol for unaccompanied minors." Kyle Lopez stepped forward. "That's not true, Meredith. They were model passengers. I observed everything." Lawrence Bennett rose from his seat. "As did I. Their only disruption was politely questioning why they were receiving inferior service." Gloria Harrison chimed in, waving her notebook. "I've documented at least 27 instances of disparate treatment during this flight alone." Malcolm addressed the security officers who stood awkwardly near the cockpit door. "Thank you for your response, but your services won't be needed. There will be no passenger removals today." He paused, looking directly at Meredith. "Except, perhaps, for crew." He turned back to the cabin. "Aeroglobe is in the midst of a comprehensive cultural transformation. When I acquired this airline 6 months ago, I made a commitment to creating an environment where every passenger is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their age, race, or background. Today has shown me that we still have significant work to do." Meredith attempted to defend herself once more. "Mr. Washington, you're misinterpreting the situation. I would never discriminate against anyone, especially children. Perhaps they misunderstood my attempts to maintain proper decorum in first class." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Bailey, are you suggesting that all the passengers who witnessed your behavior, the flight attendant who worked alongside you, and the judge who documented your actions are all misinterpreting the situation?" He picked up a phone from the galley. "For those interested, we've reviewed the security footage from the gate area as well, which shows Ms. Bailey deliberately ignoring instructions regarding the VIP status of these passengers after overhearing my conversation with Mr. Keller." Meredith's face crumpled as she realized the extent of the evidence against her. Malcolm continued addressing the cabin. "I believe in accountability at all levels, starting with leadership. As CEO, I take personal responsibility for the culture that allowed this incident to occur. Today marks a turning point for our airline. He turned to Richard. Mr. Keller, please escort Ms. Bailey from the aircraft. Her employment is suspended pending a formal investigation, though given the evidence, I think the outcome is clear. As Meredith was led away, visibly shaken, Malcolm addressed the remaining crew. We'll be bringing in a replacement crew for this flight. All current crew members except for Mr. Lopez will be temporarily reassigned to non-passenger duties until they've completed our enhanced cultural competency training. Kyle looked surprised at being singled out. Mr. Lopez, Malcolm explained, you eventually did the right thing by speaking up, though I wish you had intervened sooner. You'll be part of our new training development team. Kyle nodded, clearly relieved but also chastened. Malcolm turned back to his children. Jasmine, Isaiah, you have a choice. You can continue your journey to Atlanta once the new crew arrives, or you can return to Chicago with me. The twins exchanged looks. Despite everything that had happened, they were determined to complete their first solo trip. We want to continue, Isaiah said firmly. Jasmine nodded in agreement. Grandma and Grandpa are waiting. Malcolm smiled with pride at their resilience. Then that's what we'll do. As word of Malcolm's arrival spread throughout the aircraft, passengers pulled out their phones, documenting the historic moment when an airline CEO personally intervened in a case of discrimination. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like #AeroglobeBias and #MalcolmWashingtonStands, while news outlets began picking up the story. In the first-class galley, Malcolm conferred with Captain Phillips and the remaining crew members. A replacement team is en route from our Cleveland crew base. They should be here within the hour. The captain nodded. I'd like to apologize, sir. I had no idea what was happening in the cabin. I should have investigated more thoroughly before approving the diversion. The chain of command on an aircraft places significant trust in the lead flight attendant's assessment, Malcolm acknowledged. But yes, in situations like this, more direct verification would be appropriate. We'll address that in our updated protocols. Meanwhile, Richard Keller approached each passenger individually, offering not just compensation for the delay but an opportunity to provide detailed feedback about their observations. We're implementing immediate changes, he explained to one passenger. Your input is invaluable in helping us prevent similar incidents in the future. At the front of the cabin, Malcolm knelt beside his children's seats. I'm proud of how you handled yourselves today. You stood up for what's right without losing your composure. We remembered what you always tell us, Jasmine said softly. That our dignity isn't determined by how others treat us but by how we respond. Malcolm squeezed her hand, his throat tight with emotion. He had worked so hard to prepare his children for a world that might judge them unfairly, but experiencing it firsthand had shaken them all. I need to arrange a few things before the replacement crew arrives, he told them. Will you be okay for a few minutes? They nodded, and Malcolm made his way toward the exit to speak with airport management. As he passed row 3, Gloria Harrison gestured for him to stop. Mr. Washington, she said, offering her notebook. You might find my observations useful in your investigation. I'm Gloria Harrison, retired from the federal bench after 30 years. Malcolm accepted the notebook with gratitude. Judge Harrison, thank you for being an ally to my children when they needed one. She waved off his thanks. It's what any decent person should do. Though I must say, not everyone does. Her eyes twinkled. I've been flying for over 60 years, young man, and I've seen airlines handle situations poorly more often than not. Your response today was extraordinary. The work is just beginning, Malcolm admitted. But today made it personal in a way I hadn't anticipated. As he continued toward the exit, Lawrence Bennett intercepted him. Mr. Washington, Lawrence Bennett, he said, extending his hand. I want you to know that your children were remarkably poised throughout this ordeal. You've raised them well. Thank you for speaking up on their behalf, Malcolm replied, shaking his hand. Actually, Lawrence said, lowering his voice, there's something else you should know. I'm a partner at Jameson and Rowe. Malcolm recognized the name of one of the country's premier civil rights law firms. If you need legal support in addressing the systemic issues at Aeroglobe, I'd be happy to put you in touch with our team. I also happen to know several excellent attorneys who specialize in aviation employment law. Malcolm absorbed this offer thoughtfully. I appreciate that. This incident has made clear that we need external expertise to help guide our transformation. At the airport terminal, Malcolm held an impromptu press conference. Standing before a growing crowd of reporters, he spoke candidly about the incident. Today, my 14-year-old children experienced discrimination while flying on my own airline, he began. The irony is not lost on me. 6 months ago, I acquired Aeroglobe with the explicit goal of transforming its culture. Today showed me just how much work remains to be done. He outlined the immediate actions being taken: Meredith's suspension, the comprehensive review of all previous discrimination complaints, and the acceleration of company-wide training programs. This is not about one flight attendant, Malcolm emphasized. This is about systems and cultures that enable bias to affect customer service. As CEO, I take full responsibility for changing those systems. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Washington, some might say you're only taking such decisive action because your own children were involved. How do you respond to that? Malcolm nodded, acknowledging the fair question. I would hope I would respond this way regardless of who experienced discrimination on one of our flights. But yes, seeing my children subjected to this treatment has made the issue even more urgent and personal for me. What I can promise is that every passenger on every Aeroglobe flight deserves the same respect and dignity that I demand for my own family. Back on the aircraft, the replacement crew had arrived. Led by senior flight attendant Teresa Rodriguez, they brought fresh energy and professionalism to the cabin. We've been briefed on the situation, Teresa told the twins as she checked that they were comfortable. I want to assure you that you'll have excellent service for the remainder of your journey. Malcolm faced a difficult decision as departure time approached. An emergency board meeting awaited him in Chicago, called specifically to address the ramifications of the day's events. Yet he was reluctant to leave his children after their ordeal. Jasmine sensed his dilemma. Dad, we're okay now. Really? You should go back to Chicago for your meeting. Isaiah nodded in agreement. The new crew is great. And Grandma and Grandpa will be waiting in Atlanta. Malcolm studied their faces, seeing not just his children but young adults showing remarkable maturity. All right, he conceded. But you call me when you land, and I mean the second the wheels touch down. Promise, they chorused. As Malcolm prepared to disembark, Teresa approached him. Mr. Washington, I want you to know that your children will be in good hands. What happened today, it doesn't represent who we want to be as a company. I know, Malcolm replied. Help me make sure it doesn't represent who we actually are. With a final hug for his children, Malcolm left the aircraft. From the terminal window, he watched as Flight 237 finally departed for Atlanta, carrying not just his most precious cargo but also the seeds of transformation for the company he now led. By the time Malcolm's private jet touched down in Chicago that evening, the incident aboard Aeroglobe Flight 237 had exploded into a national conversation. What had begun as passenger videos shared on social media had quickly been picked up by major news outlets. Commentators from across the political spectrum were weighing in on the implications of what many were now calling the first-class while black incident. Malcolm's phone rang constantly with calls from board members, industry colleagues, and media outlets seeking comments. His decision to personally intervene and his candid acknowledgement of the cultural problems within his company had drawn both praise and scrutiny. In Atlanta, Jasmine and Isaiah had finally reached their grandparents' home, where they found themselves the center of attention in a way they'd never expected. Your father just called again, their grandmother, Eleanor, said as she set a plate of her famous sweet potato pie before them. He wants to make sure you're really okay. Isaiah looked up from his phone. We're fine, Grandma. But this is crazy. Look at this. He held up his screen, where #AeroGlobeBias was trending nationwide. Videos of the incident had been viewed millions of times, and the twins' composed responses to Meredith's treatment had earned them widespread admiration. "People are calling us heroes for standing up to discrimination," Jasmine said, her voice betraying her discomfort with the attention. "But we were just trying to be treated like everyone else." Their grandfather, William, a retired civil rights attorney who had marched with Dr. King, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes, child, simply asking to be treated with dignity becomes an act of courage in a world that too often denies it." Back in Chicago, Malcolm had convened an emergency board meeting at AeroGlobe headquarters. The sleek conference room on the top floor overlooked the city skyline, now twinkling with lights as evening descended. "The videos don't lie," Malcolm said as the board members reviewed footage compiled from multiple passenger perspectives. Ms. Bailey's behavior was clearly discriminatory, and the previous management's failure to address similar complaints points to a systemic issue. Richard Keller presented their initial findings. "We've identified 27 formal complaints against Ms. Bailey over her 20-year career, 18 of which involved passengers of color. None resulted in disciplinary action." Board member Victoria Chen leaned forward. "And what about the broader picture? Is this isolated to one problematic employee?" "Unfortunately, no," Richard replied, advancing to the next slide. "Our preliminary review shows a pattern across the company. Complaints of discriminatory treatment are filed at twice the industry average, but the resolution rate is half the standard." Malcolm outlined his comprehensive response plan. First, immediate termination of Ms. Bailey following due process. Second, a complete audit of all customer service complaints from the past 5 years, with priority review of those alleging discriminatory treatment. Third, mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, starting with flight crews. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. And fourth, the acceleration of our diversity initiatives at all levels of leadership. We cannot effectively serve a diverse customer base without diverse perspectives in our decision-making processes. To his relief, the board voted unanimously to support his plan, with several members suggesting even more aggressive measures. Meanwhile, social media continued to churn with reactions. While most commenters supported the Washington family, there were inevitable voices questioning whether the response had been too harsh or suggesting that Malcolm had overreacted because his own children were involved. In a particularly pointed panel discussion on CNB News, industry analysts debated the implications. "This is a masterclass in leadership," commented aviation expert Sofia Ramirez. Washington didn't just protect his children, he acknowledged the systemic problem and took immediate, concrete steps to address it. Her fellow panelist, Roger Whitfield, disagreed. "It's easy to make grand gestures when you own the company. The real question is whether this represents genuine commitment to change or just damage control." The moderator turned to the camera. "We invited AeroGlobe to provide a representative for tonight's discussion. Instead, they provided this statement: AeroGlobe acknowledges that the treatment experienced by Jasmine and Isaiah Washington reflects deeper cultural issues within our organization. We are committed to a comprehensive transformation that will make us the industry leader in equitable customer service. We will share detailed plans in the coming days, not just words but actionable commitments with clear metrics for accountability." As the media storm intensified, unexpected voices joined the conversation. Former AeroGlobe employees came forward with their own stories of witnessing or experiencing discrimination within the company. Passengers shared similar encounters on other airlines, suggesting an industry-wide problem that had long been ignored. 3 days after the incident, Malcolm arranged a video call with his children, who were still in Atlanta with their grandparents. "How are you both holding up?" he asked, noting the shadows under their eyes despite their smiles. "It's weird," Jasmine admitted. "People recognize us at the mall. A girl asked for my autograph yesterday." Isaiah nodded. "And my Instagram followers went from 200 to 20,000 overnight." Malcolm frowned. "That's a lot for anyone to handle, especially at your age." We can increase privacy settings or take a break from social media if it's too much. Actually, Isaiah said, exchanging a glance with his sister, we've been talking about using this platform to share our experiences. Not just what happened on the flight, but other times we've faced prejudice. Jasmine continued, if people are going to listen to us now, maybe we should say something meaningful. Malcolm felt a surge of pride mingled with concern. His children were showing wisdom beyond their years, but he worried about the scrutiny they would face. That's a powerful choice, he said carefully. Just remember that you don't owe your story to anyone. You can change your minds at any time. As they discussed boundaries and support systems for this new public role, Malcolm's assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Lawrence Bennett was on the line. Mr. Washington, Lawrence said when Malcolm took the call. I've been following the developments closely. Your response has been impressive, but I thought you should know something else. What is it? Malcolm asked, instantly alert. My presence on that flight wasn't coincidental. I was there as part of an investor group's due diligence process. We've been considering a significant investment in Aeroglobe to fund your international expansion. Malcolm absorbed this revelation. I see. And now? Now, Lawrence replied, we're even more interested. Your handling of this crisis demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership we want to support. Cultural problems are inevitable in large organizations with long histories. It's how leadership responds that matters. As Malcolm ended the call, he reflected on the unexpected ways this painful incident might ultimately strengthen both his family and his company. The road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time since acquiring Aeroglobe, he felt confident that meaningful change was possible. In Atlanta, as Jasmine and Isaiah helped their grandfather in his community garden, they too were processing the unexpected turns their lives had taken. What had begun as a traumatic experience was transforming into an opportunity to effect change far beyond themselves. You know what Grandpa always says, Isaiah remarked as they worked side by side. Sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be, even if it's not where you want it to be. Jasmine nodded, patting the soil around a newly planted tomato seedling. I guess we were on that flight for a reason bigger than visiting Grandma and Grandpa. The media attention would eventually fade, but the impact of what happened aboard Flight 237 was just beginning to unfold. What do you think about Malcolm's response to this situation? Has this story changed how you'll respond if you witness discrimination in the future? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories. How do you think this incident will affect Aeroglobe's future and the airline industry as a whole? Let's continue to the final chapter of this incredible story. 3 months passed swiftly following the incident on Aeroglobe Flight 237. The crisp Chicago autumn had given way to early winter, with delicate snowflakes swirling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Malcolm Washington's office as he reviewed the quarterly report on the company's transformation initiatives. Our customer satisfaction scores among passengers of color have increased by 27%, Richard Keller noted, pointing to a graph on the presentation screen. Overall satisfaction is up 12% across all demographics. Malcolm nodded, pleased but not satisfied. And the employee feedback? Mixed, but trending positive, Richard replied honestly. The initial resistance to the mandatory training has largely dissipated. Several departments have reported improved team dynamics as a result of the facilitated conversations. The door opened, and Malcolm's assistant ushered in Jasmine and Isaiah. Now back in Chicago and returning to their normal lives, the twins had become thoughtful partners in Aeroglobe's transformation journey, occasionally sitting in on meetings to offer their perspective. Perfect timing, Malcolm greeted them. We were just discussing the impact of the changes. Jasmine settled into a chair. Any word from Ms. Bailey? Following a thorough investigation that uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior, Meredith Bailey had been terminated from Aeroglobe. Initially, she had threatened a wrongful termination lawsuit, but faced with overwhelming evidence and multiple witness statements, she had instead chosen to issue a public apology. Her statement went live this morning, Richard confirmed, pulling up the video on his tablet. On screen, a subdued Meredith Bailey looked directly into the camera. "I want to apologize to Jasmine and Isaiah Washington for my treatment of them aboard Aeroglobe Flight 237. While I initially denied any bias in my actions, the evidence and testimony from other passengers forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my behavior and underlying attitudes." She paused, visibly emotional. "The past 3 months have been a period of deep personal reflection. I've had to acknowledge patterns in my interactions that I was blind to for years. This experience has been humbling and transformative. I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow, even through the painful process of accountability." When the video ended, Isaiah looked thoughtful. "Do you think she means it?" "I believe she's starting to," Malcolm replied. "Real change takes time and usually begins only after facing consequences. Her journey is just beginning, but the important thing is that she's finally on it." The family's own journey had evolved as well. While the incident had initially thrust the Washington twins into an unexpected spotlight, they had used the platform thoughtfully. With their parents' guidance, they had shared their experiences in several carefully selected forums, including a widely viewed TED Talk for teens about maintaining dignity in the face of discrimination. "Speaking of journeys," Malcolm said, checking his watch, "we should head to the airport. Your flight leaves in 2 hours." Today marked another milestone, the twins' second solo flight, once again on Aeroglobe, returning to Atlanta to spend the weekend with their grandparents. As they drove to O'Hare, Jasmine gazed out at the snow-covered landscape. "I'm not nervous this time," she realized aloud. "Last time, I was excited but also kind of anxious." "Me too," Isaiah admitted. "I kept wondering if people would treat us differently." Their father glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "And now?" "Now I know they might," Isaiah said matter-of-factly. "But I also know how to handle it, and that there are more good people who will stand up than I thought." At the terminal, they were greeted by Kyle Lopez, now Aeroglobe's Director of Customer Experience Training. His decision to speak up during the incident had transformed his career trajectory. Now he led the company's efforts to train all customer-facing staff in recognizing and addressing bias. "Ready for round 2, he asked the twins with a warm smile. "Definitely," they chorused. As they moved through the terminal, Malcolm noticed subtle but significant changes. The security checkpoint staff greeted all passengers with the same level of courtesy. The premium check-in counter was staffed with a visibly diverse team. Small details, but representative of the larger transformation underway. Near their gate, they encountered a familiar face, Gloria Harrison, the retired judge who had documented Meredith's behavior during the fateful flight. "Judge Harrison!" Jasmine exclaimed with delight. "Are you flying to Atlanta too?" "Indeed I am, dear," the elderly woman replied. "I have a meeting with your airline's new Customer Experience Advisory Board." She winked at Malcolm. "Your father was quite persuasive in convincing me to come out of retirement for this role." Malcolm smiled. "The board needed someone with both your observational skills and your commitment to fairness." As boarding began, Malcolm prepared to say goodbye to his children at the gate. This time, the farewell felt different, less anxious, more confident. "Remember," he told them, "I'm always just a phone call away. But I don't think you'll need me this time." "We know, Dad," Isaiah said, a new assurance in his bearing. "We've got this." The twins boarded the plane and found their first-class seats, greeted warmly by Teresa Rodriguez, who had been promoted to lead flight attendant after her exemplary handling of the situation 3 months earlier. "Welcome aboard," she said. "It's wonderful to see you both again." As the plane taxied for takeoff, Jasmine noticed a white businessman across the aisle watching them with interest. When he caught her eye, he smiled. "Lawrence Bennett," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "I believe we've met before." Isaiah recognized him immediately. "You stood up for us on that flight. Thank you for that." "No thanks necessary," Lawrence replied. "Though I should thank you." That day changed a lot of things, and not just for Aeroglobe. When they looked puzzled, he explained. The investment group I represent did decide to fund Aeroglobe's expansion. But more than that, we've instituted similar diversity and inclusion initiatives across all our portfolio companies. Your experience catalyzed change far beyond one airline. Meanwhile, back at Aeroglobe headquarters, Malcolm was addressing 200 new hires as part of their orientation. The company had grown rapidly as its improved reputation attracted both customers and talent. At Aeroglobe, we believe that dignity is non-negotiable, he told them. Every passenger, every employee deserves to be treated with respect regardless of their race, gender, age, or background. He shared the story of Flight 237, not hiding the company's failures but emphasizing how they had become the foundation for meaningful transformation. We're not perfect, he acknowledged. We're still learning and growing. But we're committed to doing better every day. As he concluded his remarks, his phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine, plane about to take off. Everything great so far. Love you. Malcolm smiled. A small message, but it represented enormous progress. That weekend, the Washington family gathered for a company picnic in a Chicago park, where the diverse staff mingled easily despite the chilly weather. Malcolm watched with satisfaction as employees from all backgrounds chatted and laughed together, many accompanied by their families. Quite a change from the company culture I inherited, he remarked to Richard Keller. Richard nodded. It's like night and day. Employee retention is up, complaints are down, and we're attracting talent from competitors. And all because my kids were brave enough to speak up when they were treated unfairly, Malcolm mused. Across the park, Jasmine and Isaiah were engaged in an animated conversation with several younger flight attendants, sharing their perspective on how small interactions could make passengers feel either valued or diminished. The incident aboard Flight 237 had begun as a painful reminder of persistent prejudice but had transformed into something powerful, a catalyst for change not just within one family or one company, but rippling outward into the broader community. As Malcolm watched his children, confident, articulate, and making a difference in the world, he felt a profound sense of pride. They had faced discrimination with dignity and helped transform adversity into opportunity, not just for themselves but for countless others who would benefit from the changes they had helped inspire. The journey was far from over, but they were flying in the right direction. What would you have done in Malcolm's position? Would you have taken such bold steps to transform your company's culture? Have you ever witnessed discrimination and chosen to speak up? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story inspiring, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit from this powerful example of standing up against injustice. Thank you for joining us for this incredible journey, and we look forward to bringing you more stories of courage and transformation in the future. This powerful story reminds us that discrimination exists in everyday situations where power imbalances allow it to flourish unchecked. It teaches us several important lessons. First, standing up with dignity against unfair treatment requires courage but creates lasting change. Second, allies matter. Without witnesses like Gloria, Lawrence, and Kyle speaking up, the truth might have remained hidden. Third, leadership starts at the top. Malcolm's willingness to acknowledge problems within his own company rather than deflect responsibility created the foundation for genuine transformation. Fourth, accountability must be consistent. Previous complaints against Meredith were ignored until someone with power was affected. Finally, one incident of discrimination is rarely isolated. It typically reflects deeper systemic issues requiring comprehensive, not cosmetic, solutions. The Washington family turned their painful experience into a catalyst for change, showing how adversity can become opportunity when confronted with courage and integrity. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination like this in public? Would you speak up like Lawrence and Gloria, or remain silent? Have you ever experienced similar treatment while traveling or shopping? Share your stories in the comments below. Your experiences matter and might help others feel less alone. If you found this story about standing up against racism meaningful, please hit that like button to help it reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life stories that inspire courage and change. And if you know someone who's experienced discrimination or someone who needs to understand its impact, share this video with them. Thank you for joining us on this journey toward a more just society. Remember, small acts of courage can create ripples of change that transform entire communities.